When the wildfire reached Red Dune Ridge, every house on the ridge burned. Every house except one. In the middle of the blackened sand, surrounded by ash and collapsed beams, stood an untouched shack. Its wooden walls warm, its roof unburned, its windows glowing with faint orange light. Fire crews swore they saw flames bending around it, wind shifting direction, sparks dying before touching its walls. Inside that shack, they found an old man sitting cross-legged, staring into a bowl of glowing embers that were not from any known wood. He looked up at them and said only one thing: the fire remembered. If you love powerful, atmospheric stories rooted in cultural mysteries, subscribe now, because this one is unlike anything you've heard. Now let's go back to the beginning. Red Dune Ridge sits far in the Australian interior, a place where heat shimmers above the ground and the sand turns a deep rust red at sunrise. People there live simple lives: cattle, long drives, dusty yards, and nights filled with stars brighter than city lights could ever allow. But the ridge also carried an older name, a name whispered by Arunte and Pitjantjatjara elders long before European settlement: Rongalura, the place where fire listens. The stories said fire had memory here. Not magic, memory. A way of hearing what the land feared, of burning only what needed renewal, of sparing what needed saving. Most thought this was poetic metaphor. But not everyone. One man believed it fully: Harlan Winton. Harlan was the kind of man who looked carved from the outback, lean, weathered, silent. He lived alone in a tiny shack on the ridge, a structure that looked like a stiff breeze could knock it over. But he wasn't strange. He was respected. Because he spent his entire life doing one job: listening to fire. He could predict bushfires by the dryness of ants' nests. He could smell when wind would shift. He knew how to build fire breaks that stopped flames dead in their tracks. He also kept a tradition alive, one almost no one understood anymore: the fire memory ritual. Every summer solstice, Harlan would walk into the dunes at sunset carrying a handmade bowl carved from mulga wood. He'd gather certain plants: old man saltbush, desert oak bark, shredded acacia, and burn them slowly. Not for smoke. For memory. Elders said the ritual reminded fire of its purpose: not destruction, but balance. People humored him. Some called it superstition. But no one denied this fact: whenever Harlan performed his ritual, the ridge stayed safe. For 30 years. The summer of the big blaze started hotter than usual: heat waves smashing records, kangaroos collapsing near empty waterholes, wind roaring like freight trains at night. Harlan felt the shift early. He didn't sleep much. He walked the ridge every morning, checking soil, wind, bark texture. But one night, something happened he couldn't explain. A fire began in the western scrub, a small one, but instead of drifting lazily along the grass as usual, it ran straight toward the ridge. Harlan watched from the hilltop. His heart tightened. Fire wasn't supposed to move like that. It wasn't following wind. It wasn't following fuel. It was following something else. Something Harlan didn't want to name. He whispered, "Not yet. Not like this." But the fire didn't listen. The next morning, a strange thing happened. The sky above Red Dune Ridge darkened with smoke. But not from wildfire. From a single column rising from the dunes. Harlan walked toward it, uneasy. When he reached the column's base, his breath caught. The smoke wasn't rising from burning wood. It was rising from sand. Bright red sand glowing faintly beneath the surface. He knelt, pressed his palm to the ground. Warm. Too warm. He whispered the words his grandmother taught him as a boy: "Rongalura, what do you remember?" The sand trembled. A pulse moved through the earth, faint but real. Harlan staggered back. This wasn't a wildfire. This was a summons. Right here is where fire crews later said the story turns from strange to impossible. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe, because these stories of cultural mysteries only get deeper. Now let's continue. The fire reached the ridge at 2 p.m. Flames shot up the dune sides in twisting columns. Wind screamed across the sand. Ash rained from the sky like black snow. Homes were evacuated. Families fled downhill. Fire trucks lined the road. But when they tried to approach the ridge, their hoses sputtered. Water wouldn't pressurize. Then radios began cutting out. Static. Silence. Whispers beneath the static. Firefighters swore they heard a voice saying, "Not this one." But no one believed them. At least not yet. Harlan didn't evacuate. He stood at the ridge's highest point, watching fire race toward him. He didn't panic. He didn't run. He whispered, "I hear you." Then he walked straight into the smoke. Fire crews shouted, ran toward him. But the flames bent around Harlan, literally shifting direction, curving, recoiling. Cameras captured it. Scientists later dismissed it as heat distortion. But everyone who was there knew what they saw. Fire was avoiding him. Harlan walked until he reached the center of the ridge. He knelt, opened his old leather satchel, and took out the mulgawood bowl. The bowl was carved with symbols, flowing lines like wind, triangles like mountains, circles like suns. Inside it were the dried plants he gathered every year. He struck a match. The flame flared, glowed orange, then blue, then pure white. The wind stopped. The dunes stilled. Even the wildfire paused, its rushing sound sucked away. Harlan whispered the ritual words. Fire holds memory. Fire remembers pain. Fire remembers purpose. Fire remembers us. The bowl flared brighter. Flames around him dimmed, and the entire ridge seemed to inhale. The bowl's flame rose higher, forming shapes, outlines, snapshots. Harlan saw images inside the fire, ancient people performing rituals inside the dunes. Fire burning only dead brush, avoiding homes. Fire forming rings around sacred sites but never touching them. Fire consuming invasive grasses but sparing native ones. Fire clearing paths for regrowth. Fire, choosing. Harlan whispered, "You protected us." The flame pulsed. Then another image appeared, the ridge burning. Homes destroyed. People fleeing. Animals dying. A possible future. Harlan's throat tightened. He whispered, "You want to help." The flame flared gold. Then the answer came, not in words, but in feeling. Fire was being pushed. Forced. Driven by unnatural dryness. The land's memory was being erased. Harlan whispered, "Then let me remind you." What happened next was recorded by dozens of firefighters and later studied by physicists who refused to comment publicly. The wildfire hit the ridge in a massive wall of flame. But the moment it neared Harlan, it split, dividing like a river around a stone. Flames curved around him, swirled, twisted, then rushed downhill into the western flats, where no home stood. The ridge itself remained untouched. Every home, except Harlan's, burned. Every home but his. His shack stood in the middle of the charred landscape, unburned, lit softly from within. Inside, Harlan sat cross-legged, the mulga bowl glowing faintly in front of him. He looked up at the fire crews and said, "The fire remembered what it came for." Harlan was taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. He survived. Barely. When authorities asked how he survived inside the blaze, he simply said, "Because I listened." Fire scientists visited the ridge for weeks. They found strange burn patterns, circles where fire died instantly, lines where it changed direction abruptly, patches of sand fused into glass as though heated from inside the earth. Seismic sensors recorded pulse-like vibrations under the dune during the fire. No one had explanations. Except Harlan. Harlan rebuilt his shack and continued his rituals every summer. People who once laughed now respected him. Some feared him. After a while, Harlan began training his granddaughter, Lena, to listen the way he listened. "Fire is not alive," he told her, "but it remembers. And it expects us to remember too." Whenever storms gathered and the air smelled like iron, Harlan would stand on the ridge holding the bowl, listening as if waiting for fire to speak again. It never did. Not to him. But one winter, Lena claimed she heard something while tending a small cooking fire, a whisper, soft and warm, like breath in her ear, "Not today." She never told Harlan. But she knew what it meant. The ridge had a new firekeeper. The land always remembers. And sometimes, it chooses. If you enjoyed this story and want more atmospheric tales of forgotten rituals, ancient signs, and the people who still follow them, subscribe now. The next story takes us into the frozen forests of northern Canada, where an old night circle ritual was said to protect hunters from what walked between the trees. And trust me, that one is even darker.